The bell tolled once. Its sound moved slowly through the mist, a trembling note across stone and field. The first light of morning touched the edges of the manor, gilding the dew that clung to the wild grass. Horses stirred in their stables. Somewhere, a blackbird began to sing. And there, beside a window of leaded glass, a knight awoke. He had dreamed of the road of the days when his armor still shone bright, when the banners of his lord caught the wind like wings. But now, as the candle beside his bed gave its last faint breath, he rose not to glory, but to order. The rhythm of his life was older than memory: prayer, service, silence. Outside, the world waited the smell of damp earth, the sigh of wood smoke, the soft clatter of the cook's ladle in the courtyard kitchen. A pale sky unfolded above the turrets, promising neither battle nor peace, only another turn of the endless wheel. It was in such mornings that a knight felt the full weight of what his oath meant. Not the songs sung in the hall, nor the golden promises of poets, but the quiet vow kept when no one watched, to serve, to protect, to endure. He dressed in the dimness, linen first, rough wool above, then the cold whisper of mail upon his skin. Each link was a memory, each plate a prayer. As he fastened the last strap, he paused, listening to the murmur of distant monks at their matins, their voices echoing through the chill stone corridors of the keep. Through the narrow slit of the window, dawn broke upon the fields below. Serfs moved like shadows among the furrows. Smoke curled upward from the village hearths. Beyond them, the forest waited, a dark and ancient boundary where knights once proved their courage and sometimes lost it. He remembered his youth, then the page's laughter, the sting of practiced swords, the first time he touched a real blade and felt it hum like a living thing. He remembered the old master at arms who said, "Steel remembers the hand that wields it." The knight smiled faintly. The world had changed little since those words were spoken. The seasons turned, kings rose and fell, and yet the sound of steel at dawn remained eternal, solemn, unbroken. And so his day began not in conquest, but in quiet ritual, a life shaped by discipline, bound by duty, softened by faith. Tonight, we will walk beside him through his hours, his labors, his prayers, and his memories. We will see what life truly was for one who bore the weight of the sword, not as legend tells it, but as the candlelight reveals it. The forge, the chapel, the field, the hall, each shall speak. The bell tolls again. The day of a knight has begun. Chapter 1. The Forge and the Field. The air before sunrise was heavy with the scent of iron and hay. In the courtyard below, a spark bloomed bright and brief as the blacksmith's hammer met the anvil. The sound rolled across the stillness like a heartbeat, steady and patient. It was the sound upon which the age itself was built. The knight descended the spiral stair from his chamber, the chill of the stone seeping through his boots. He paused beneath a low archway and breathed in the morning that mingling of smoke, sweat, and cold metal that clung to the bones of every stronghold in the realm. It was here, among the tools and the fire, that his story had truly begun. He had once been a boy in such a place, small hands blackened by soot, eyes wide with awe at the men who shaped iron into armor. The forge was a temple of its own, and the blacksmith its priest. The rhythm of the hammer was a litany, the glow of the coals, a quiet gospel. Now, as a grown knight, he watched the smith at work. Sparks rose and fell like fleeting stars. The great bellows sighed, and molten light poured across the blackened walls. A breastplate lay cooling on the bench, marked with the faint impression of the maker's seal, a cross enclosed within a circle. Strength and faith, united in steel. "Good morrow, my lord," the smith murmured, not lifting his gaze. "And peace upon your hands," the knight replied, for that was the old courtesy between soldier and craftsman. He traced his gloved hand along the edge of a shield waiting to be fitted. The wood beneath the iron rim was scarred from years of use, each groove a memory of battle past. No man's armor remained unmarked for long. Beyond the forge, the village stirred to life. The sun broke free from the horizon, gilding the thatch of cottages and the pale mist above the fields. Oxen snorted as they were yoked, and the rhythmic creak of leather harnesses joined the waking sounds of crows and distant church bells. The knight walked to the palisade, where he could look down upon the farmland below. To the eyes of a stranger, it might have seemed simple men with plows, women with baskets, the earth turning beneath their tools. but he knew how much labor lay beneath that simplicity. The soil itself was a companion, sometimes generous, sometimes cruel. In his youth, he had spent long seasons beside the serfs, learning to respect the rhythm of the land. For though a knight held title and blade, his life too depended upon the harvest. The bread on his table was born from the same soil that dirtied the hands of peasants. The wind carried the smell of damp earth upward. From here he could see the furrows drawn in neat lines, like the pages of a vast brown book upon which all their lives were written. The men worked slowly, pushing the plow through heavy clay, while the women followed with seed pouches, casting life into the furrows one handful at a time. He remembered the words of an old priest who had once blessed the fields. From the sweat of your brow shall come your daily bread, and from your bread the peace of your soul. The knight closed his eyes for a moment. The words lingered like incense. He turned toward the stables. Inside, the horses shifted restlessly, their breath clouding in the cool air. His destrier, a tall bay with a scar beneath its left eye, greeted him with a low snort. The knight brushed its mane with slow care, each stroke a small act of reverence. A good horse was not a possession, but a partner. In battle, the bond between man and beast was measured in heartbeats and trust. He checked the tack, the bridle, the greaves. Every strap told its own story of campaigns long past. Muddy roads through France, a winter siege by the sea, the long silence that followed victory. He remembered the smell of rain on armor, the ache of the sword arm after a day's charge, the strange peace that settled over a battlefield when the cries had ceased. But today, there was no war to summon him, only duty quieter, steadier, and perhaps harder in its own way. Outside, the steward approached, carrying a roll of parchment. He bowed lightly. "My lord, the tithes are due from the southern farms. Father Elaine asks your word on the grain measure." The knight nodded. "See that it is fair. The church feeds those who cannot feed themselves. Let none go hungry while our barns are full." The steward bowed again and withdrew. For a moment, the knight stood alone in the stable doorway, watching the sunlight spill across the courtyard stones. Dust motes drifted through the air like slow, golden snow. In that stillness, he felt the strange duality of his station warrior and warden, feared and relied upon. His sword had been forged for battle, yet most days it served as a symbol of peace, a reminder that order, not blood, was his true burden. He stepped outside, the morning now in full bloom. Chickens scattered at his feet. A child ran past, laughing, a bundle of rushes in his arms. Somewhere nearby, the kitchen door opened, and the smell of baking bread drifted out, warm and comforting. It mingled with the sharper scent of the forge still burning, until the two became indistinguishable sustenance and strength, bound together as life itself was. The knight made his way toward the chapel at the edge of the courtyard. The small stone building sat beneath an ancient yew, its branches heavy with dew. Inside, a single candle flickered before the carved figure of St. George, patron of soldiers, slayer of dragons, protector of the righteous. He knelt. The cold of the flagstone seeped through his knees, grounding him in the moment. "Grant me steadiness of hand," he whispered, "and gentleness of heart. Let me wield the sword in justice, not in pride." His voice was quiet, nearly lost to the silence. Outside, a soft wind stirred the banners hanging from the tower. The emblems, a golden lion, a black cross, rippled lazily, their edges frayed from years of weather. They were symbols, yes, but also burdens. To live beneath them meant more than valor. It meant restraint, patience, mercy, when vengeance would be easier. When he rose, the chapel felt smaller, as though the prayer itself had filled its corners. He stepped out again into the light. The forge had quieted now, its fire banked low. Across the fields, the plowmen paused to eat, their laughter faint but distinct. The knight looked upon them and felt something rare, not pity, not pride, but kinship. They labored with their bodies as he labored with his conscience. Each bore weight suited to his station. Each kept the world turning in his own quiet way. He thought of the old campaigns, the sieges, the parades, all those grand displays of valor that poets loved to sing, yet none of it endured as truly as this. The rhythm of hammer and hoe, of prayer and plow, of men and women shaping the day with their hands. He returned to the courtyard as the noon bell rang. Its sound carried across the valley, mingling with the cries of crows and the hum of insects in the hedgerow. Servants brought buckets of water from the well, and the knight drank deeply, feeling the cool liquid wash away the iron taste of memory. There was peace in the ordinary, he thought, even for one trained to fight. As the sun climbed higher, the fields shimmered with heat. The smith rested his hammer, the plowman turned for home. The knight stood at the edge of his lands, watching as shadows shortened, as life unfolded in patient repetition. This was the true strength of his order, not conquest, not ceremony, but endurance. The forge would burn again tomorrow, the fields would open their furrows once more, and he, in his quiet armor, would rise with the dawn to guard it all again. The bell tolled for midday. Its echo faded into the warm air. The knight bowed his head, murmured a brief prayer for those who toiled unseen, and turned toward the hall. Behind him, the forge sighed, a final plume of smoke rising like a benediction. Before him, the long afternoon awaited the next rhythm in the endless song of duty and daylight. And so, the day turned. Chapter 2. Under the tolling bell. The bell rang again, slower now, fuller, carrying across the valley with a solemn grace that could still the air itself. Its voice was both command and comfort, marking the hour when the faithful bowed their heads and remembered that time, like life, was not their own to master. From the keep to the low cottages, all paused for a breath. The peasants leaned upon their hoes, the washerwomen lifted their hands from the stream. Even the hounds, those restless sentinels of the courtyard, quieted at the sound. The knight stood by the chapel gate, one gloved hand resting on the cold iron latch. The noon sun burned high above, silvering the roofs and casting deep shadows beneath the eaves. A wind passed softly through the cloister garden, stirring the rosemary and thyme. Their scent mingled with the waxy sweetness of melted candles drifting from within the chapel. The bell tolled once more. Its echo lingered upon the stones. He entered. Inside, the light was dim and golden. Rays of sun filtered through the narrow windows, touching the dust that hung suspended like quiet souls in the air. Wooden pews, worn smooth by generations of hands and prayers, lined the small nave. A tapestry of the Passion hung behind the altar, its colors faded, but its story eternal. At the far end, Father Alain knelt in silence, his lips moving in slow rhythm. He was a thin man, stooped with years, his robe patched at the elbows. Yet his presence carried the calm weight of the sacred, a man who had long traded comfort for peace. The knight moved to a side pew and knelt. His armor creaked softly, the sound small yet out of place among the holy stillness. He bowed his head, eyes tracing the flicker of the altar flame. There was a time when prayer had come to him easily, when faith had been a bright banner fluttering above his heart, but years of campaign and command had worn its edges thin. He prayed now not for triumph, but for rest for himself, for his men long gone, for the nameless dead buried beneath distant soil. Father Alain rose and approached. His sandals whispered against the stone, "Peace be upon you, my son." "And upon you, Father." "You look weary," the old priest said gently. "The weight of the helm sits heavier each year," the knight replied. The priest smiled faintly. "Then let the bell carry it for you. That is why it rings to remind the proud and the poor alike that all burdens find echo in heaven." They stood together in silence. From outside came the faint bleating of sheep, the cry of a distant hawk, the measured strike of the blacksmith's hammer beginning anew. The world continued its humble work while the chapel held its stillness like a cup of calm water. The knight's gaze lifted to the crucifix above the altar, the figure of Christ carved in ashwood, the face serene despite the thorns. How many times had he sought courage here before battle? How many oaths had been sworn beneath that gaze, some kept, some broken, all remembered? The priest returned to his prayers. The knight lingered, his thoughts drifting like motes in the amber light. He remembered his first campaign when he was no older than 20. The bells had rung then too, but for war. They had sounded across the fields to summon men to arms, to warn the villages, to stir courage from fear. That same voice of bronze could bless or condemn, could call to mass or to death. Now, in age, he preferred it as it was now steady, unhurried, calling not to blood but to mercy. When the prayer ended, he left an offering of silver on the altar coin, enough to feed a widow or mend a roof. Father Alain nodded in gratitude but said nothing. The knight bowed his head once more and stepped back into the light. Outside, the bell lay silent, its duty fulfilled until evening. A hush had settled over the courtyard, as if the sound still echoed unseen. He crossed toward the cloister walk. Here, The air was cooler, shaded by arches of stone and ivy. Bees drifted lazily among the flowers. The cloister garden had been tended by monks for a century, each planting and harvest another layer in the monastery's quiet chronicle. The knight often came here to think not of war, but of time. The garden was the one place where the rhythm of the world felt slower, kind, deliberate. Each leaf glistened with dew. Each pebble seemed placed by patient hands. He sat upon the stone bench beside the fountain. Its water trickled softly over worn marble, the sound mingling with birdsong. He removed his gauntlets and let his fingers brush the cool surface. For a long while, he watched the ripples form and fade, thinking how much life resembled this, the widening circles of choice and consequence, fading quietly into stillness. Beyond the cloister walls, the village bell answered thinner, fainter. Its note reached him like a whisper. Somewhere down there, children were likely chasing chickens between huts. An old woman was probably counting her loaves, a shepherd turning his flock toward the meadow. The same sound joined them all, binding lord and laborer in the same hour. He smiled faintly. "One bell, 1,000 hearts," he murmured, repeating a saying he'd once heard from a pilgrim knight. The thought pleased him. He leaned back, eyes half closed, and listened. The hum of bees, the soft sigh of wind through yew and cypress, the creak of wood somewhere high above every sound seemed part of one vast breath. This was what the young never understood, he thought, that peace is not the absence of sound, but the harmony of it. After a time, the steward approached, careful not to disturb the stillness. "My lord, the children of the village await your word for the feast of St. Martin. The minstrel has come from the abbey, and the folk gather by the green." The knight nodded. "Tell them I shall come by vespers. Let the music begin with the setting of the sun." The steward bowed and withdrew. The knight remained a while longer. Shadows stretched across the cloister floor, tracing the passage of time. He thought of his years spent in service of the comrades lost, of the castles won and surrendered. The sound of bells had followed every step: marriage, birth, battle, death. Each ring a turning of life's unseen wheel. At last he rose. His armor caught the late light, casting slow-moving reflections upon the walls. He made his way toward the tower stairs, climbing until he reached the belfry itself. The bell stood there, silent now immense, weathered, rimmed with verdigris. Its lip bore faint marks where countless ropes had rubbed and frayed. He ran his hand along the metal, feeling its cold patience. Through the open slats of the tower, he could see the fields stretching to the horizon. The people below were small figures in a painting of motion. Farmers gathering sheaves, women drawing water, dogs darting between barns. The world moved beneath him, fragile yet unbroken. He wondered how many times this same bell had spoken to them in plague and harvest, in wedding and war. How many generations had lifted their faces to its sound, finding comfort in knowing that someone, somewhere, was keeping time for them. The knight bowed his head and whispered, "Ring long after I am gone." The wind stirred then, and for a moment he thought he heard a faint hum from the bronze, as though the bell remembered his prayer. He descended the stairs slowly, each step hollow beneath his boots. The courtyard glowed with the last amber of day. The long shadows of the battlements reached like fingers toward the gate. A kitchen maid crossed his path carrying a loaf still steaming from the oven. She curtsied shyly. The knight smiled, taking a piece and offering his thanks. The bread was coarse but sweet, tasting of grain and hearth. He ate as he walked toward the wall walk, where the evening watch would soon take post. The air had cooled, tinged with the faint scent of pine smoke drifting from distant cottages. In the west, the sun sank behind the hills, and once more, as if in answer to his earlier wish, the bell began to ring for vespers. Its tone rolled through the valley, deep and tender, calling all to rest. Men put down their tools. Mothers gathered their children. In the chapel, Father Alain lit the last of the candles. And on the battlements, the knight stood watching, his silhouette framed by the crimson sky. The bell tolled on. With each note, he felt the day folding softly inward from labor to prayer, from sound to silence. When the final echo faded, night would come. The torches would be lit, and the hall would fill with murmurs, laughter, the clink of cups. But for now, there was this moment, suspended, eternal, between day's end and the hush of evening. He breathed in deeply, letting the last warmth of sunlight touch his face. The bell fell silent at last, leaving only the wind and the faint cry of an owl from the woods below. And so the hour turned once more, another measure of time in a life bound by faith, by duty, by the sound that never truly ceased. The night closed his eyes. The stillness settled